Billionaire Jack Sterling sneaks into his five-star hotel, overhears employees' cruel plan. A peeling mint green 1998 Ford F-50 rolled slowly into the underground parking garage of the Sterling Plaza Hotel at 10:43 a.m. on an early Tuesday morning. Inside was a single man about 55 years old, wearing a worn gray flannel shirt that was faded at both elbows, a pair of old Levi's jeans so faded the label was illegible, and a black baseball cap with faint unreadable lettering. He had 3 days' worth of stubble, and his hair was a little long and messy under the brim of his cap. He looked like nothing more than an off-duty construction worker or a long-haul trucker stopping for lunch. No one on the hotel staff knew that this man, Jonathan Sterling, or Jack, as his close friends called him, was the owner of this entire massive property. Sterling Plaza wasn't just a hotel. It was the crown jewel of his $8.2 billion business empire, a chain of 12 five-star hotels spanning the United States, from Manhattan to Beverly Hills, from Miami to Seattle, and this branch in Austin, Texas, located at 422 South Congress Avenue overlooking the picturesque Colorado River, was the very first, the place where it all began. Jack turned off the engine and sat in silence for a few more seconds. He slipped the $127,000 Patek Philippe watch from his wrist, wrapped it in a brown leather cloth, and tucked it into his inner jacket pocket. Instead, he pulled the sleeve of his flannel shirt down to cover his bare wrist. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror, an ordinary man, nothing more. Unnoticeable. That was exactly what he needed. 7 months ago, an internal report had landed on his desk. Revenue at the Sterling Plaza Austin was stable, but employee turnover had increased by 37% compared to the same period last year. The resignation letters all cited the same vague reason: personal reasons. No one made accusations, no one complained, but something was rotting from within the system, and Jack Sterling needed to find out for himself. He didn't send inspectors, he didn't dispatch a regional manager, and he gave no prior warning. He came here in disguise, posing as a stranger to observe. The antique bell hanging on the hotel's glass door chimed as Jack walked in, a deep, warm sound he had hand-picked himself 12 years ago when he'd bought it from an antique shop in New Orleans. It felt like coming home after a long trip, but not a single employee looked up. 2 young women at the reception desk were staring at their computers. A young man at the cashier's counter was engrossed in his phone, and a few servers were clearing the last of the breakfast tables. No one recognized him. Jack chose a table at the far end of the room, near a window, where he could observe the entire main lobby and part of the kitchen area through a frosted glass door. A waitress approached, avoiding eye contact, her voice monotone. "Sir, what can I get for you?" Jack glanced at the menu, pretending he didn't already know it by heart. "A black coffee and a grilled chicken sandwich. That'll be $17.25, sir." Jack handed her a $20 bill and told her to keep the change. The waitress nodded, tucked the money into her apron pocket, and walked away. Not a single extra word. Jack began to watch. The first thing he noticed was an old man in the kitchen. The dishwashing area was located behind a swinging door, and through the brief moments it swung open. Jack caught glimpses of a slender figure, his back slightly stooped, a dish towel in his hand. The man wore a faded blue uniform. Different from the navy blue of the official staff, it was the uniform of the kitchen cleaning crew. He moved slowly, but relentlessly, wiping plates, then stacking glasses, then polishing silverware. His old hands, with knuckles swollen from arthritis, worked with incredible meticulousness. Jack asked the waitress when she brought his coffee, "That older gentleman in the kitchen, has he been here long?" The girl glanced quickly toward the kitchen, then back at him, her tone slightly annoyed. "Arthur, probably for 7 years now. He was here before I started." Jack nodded without another word. For the next 2 hours, Jack sat quietly. He drank 2 cups of coffee, finished his sandwich, and watched. He saw Arthur step out of the kitchen 4 times. The first time to pick up a fallen tablecloth, fold it neatly, and place on a table. The second time, to help a young busboy clean up a coffee spill on the floor. The busboy muttered a thank you, and Arthur simply patted him on the shoulder before turning back. The third time, he brought out a fresh tray of orange juice and placed it on the self-serve counter, even though it wasn't his job. And the fourth time, an elderly woman with a cane stepped out of the elevator. She was dressed simply in an old wool cardigan and leather shoes with worn-down heels. She went to the front counter and asked for a bowl of butternut squash soup and a slice of pumpernickel bread. Courtney, the young cashier with elaborately dyed blonde hair, coldly rang it up. The butternut squash soup is $6.50. The pumpernickel bread is $3.25. Total is $9.75. The old woman opened her small, worn leather wallet and fumbled with a few small bills. The color drained from her face. Oh dear, I only have $7.28. I thought I had enough. Her voice trembled. Courtney said nothing, merely shrugging. The kind of cold shrug only someone who has never known hardship can give. The old woman was about to turn and leave. Then Arthur appeared. He stepped out of the kitchen, his hands still wet, which he quickly wiped on his apron. He pulled a small wallet from his back pocket, a leather wallet so old and worn its original color was gone, and took out some money to make up the difference. The old woman looked at Arthur, her eyes welling up. "Arthur, are you helping me again?" Arthur just smiled, the wrinkles deepening on his old face, his voice as soft as a whisper. "Yes, ma'am, please go ahead and eat. It's nothing at all. Just be sure to take your medicine." Jack saw it all. He saw the old woman's trembling hand as she took the tray of soup. He saw Arthur's smile, a smile with no hint of strain, as if giving away his money was the most natural thing in the world. And he also saw Courtney, the blonde girl, who, after the old woman was out of sight, turned to Trevor, the young man from the reception desk, and whispered, "Where does that old man get his money? Is he begging on the side or something?" Trevor smirked, his eyes narrowing. Or maybe from the safe. Who knows? The hand jacket wrapped around his coffee cup tightened involuntarily. His knuckles turned white. He looked toward the kitchen, through the frosted glass door, and saw Arthur bent over, picking up the shattered pieces of a plate someone had dropped. He didn't yell. He didn't complain. He just gently cleaned up, as if even the sharp shards of glass deserved to be handled with care. Jack wondered himself, how can he give so much when he has so little? It was a question with no answer. That afternoon, Jack returned to the hotel at 4 o'clock and sat at the same table. This time he brought a newspaper to hide behind, but his eyes never left the kitchen. Arthur had been working since the morning without a single hour's break. Jack noticed the old man occasionally reaching to rub his stomach and lower back, the aches and pains of old age after so many hours of standing and bending, but he never once sat down to rest. Around 5:15 in the afternoon, a young student walked in. He wore an old University of Texas hoodie and a backpack, his face gaunt and weary. He ordered the dinner special, the most expensive item on the menu, $18.95. He ate quickly, as if he'd been starving. When he went to the counter to pay, he pulled out a credit card and swiped it. The machine reported an error. He swiped it again. Error. His face began to flush and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. Maybe I can call my mom." His voice shook. Courtney shook her head coldly. "You need to pay now or leave your information." Arthur appeared again. This time, he said nothing, simply placing a $20 bill on the counter. He looked at the student. "Take the change." The student looked up at Arthur, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep or maybe humiliation. It was hard to tell. Arthur just patted him gently on the shoulder. "Go on and get back to your studies, son. Hard days like these will pass." The student bowed his head in thanks. His voice choked with emotion, then quickly walked out the door. Trevor turned to Courtney, speaking a little louder this time, probably thinking no one was paying attention to a couple of young employees. 7 years washing dishes for $3 an hour. Where's that old geezer getting his money? He's definitely skimming from the safe, then using a little bit of it to look like some kind of saint. Courtney nodded, her lips pursed. Could be. Jack lowered his newspaper. He looked directly at the two young employees, but they didn't notice him at all. To them, a man in a worn flannel shirt and an old baseball cap was a nobody. Jack suddenly felt an immense sadness. Not for himself, but for Arthur, a man who gave away what little money he had, only to receive contempt in return from those who had never learned what it meant to give. Jack decided he would stay. He would stay until he uncovered the truth. That night, the hotel closed to guests at 11 o'clock. Jack didn't go to the presidential suite on the 12th floor, which he had booked under a false name. Instead, he sat in his old truck, parked in a corner of the lot, watching the employee entrance. 11:47 p.m., the back door opened. Arthur emerged, still in his faded blue uniform, carrying a small plastic bag. He walked very slowly toward a mint green Ford truck parked in the farthest corner of the lot, an old beat-up truck that looked just like Jack's. Jack held his breath as he watched Arthur open the truck's rear canopy. Inside wasn't luggage or equipment. It was a folded mattress, a small electric heater, and a few neatly stacked cans of food. Arthur was living in his truck. Jack watched Arthur climb into the driver's seat, sit in silence for a moment, then open his old leather wallet. The old man took out a photograph. From that distance, Jack could see it was of a woman with salt and pepper hair and a gentle smile, and a creased hospital bill. Under the dim streetlight, Jack tried to read the words on the paper. St. David's Medical Center, remaining balance, $47,231.78. Jack sat perfectly still. His hands rested on the steering wheel. He didn't get out, didn't knock on the window. He just sat there, looking through his windshield, and saw Arthur wipe his face with his sleeve. It wasn't sweat, it was tears, Jack counted. He sat there for 17 minutes. 17 minutes watching a man who had lost his wife, lost his home, was nearly $50,000 in medical debt, and lived in an old truck, yet still took money from his own pocket to help others. Jack didn't understand it, but he knew one thing: this man deserved so much more. The next morning, Wednesday, Jack arrived earlier. He had sent a encrypted message to his personal lawyer, Margaret Chen, requesting her presence in Austin by Thursday afternoon. He didn't want to disrupt his plan. He needed proof. He needed time. He needed to let them expose themselves completely. At 9:15 in the morning, while the hotel lobby was at its peak before checkout time, Jack sat at table number 7, the position with the clearest view of the reception and cashier desks. Trevor and Courtney were leaning against the counter, thinking no one was paying them any mind amidst the morning chaos. Jack wore a wireless earpiece, connected to a remote microphone he had planted in a decorative potted plant near the reception desk the night before. I checked. The Employee Assistance Fund has $4,217.83 left. Trevor's voice, a whisper but crystal clear in the earpiece. It just needs a little adjustment. Courtney chuckled softly. And we blame old man Arthur. Exactly. Who wouldn't believe it? The old guy's been here 7 years, lowest salary, and suddenly he has money to help people. It makes perfect sense. Linda will buy it immediately. She's disliked him for a long time. She just never had a reason. Jack closed his eyes. The words poured out one by one, like small knives stabbing into his chest. They discussed the details. Trevor would withdraw $847.63 from the employee fund at 3:22 p.m. on Thursday during Linda's meeting. Courtney would write a fake email from Linda, confirming that Arthur had received an emergency assistance payment. They would then both accidentally have a loud conversation in front of Linda on Friday morning. Jack pressed the record button on his phone. Done. He had the proof, but he didn't want it to end yet. He wanted to see just how far they would go. That afternoon, Jack sought out Frank Morrison, a regular who had come to the hotel almost every day for the past 3 years. Frank, a retiree with a full head of white hair and a kind smile, was sitting at the bar drinking black coffee. Jack, next to him, ordered a tea and asked, "Do you know anything about Arthur, the man who washes dishes?" Frank looked at Jack for a moment, as if assessing whether to tell the story or not. Then he sighed. "You want to hear a sad story?" Frank told him. Arthur and Dorothy had been high school sweethearts. They fell in love, got married, and spent 52 years together without a single day apart. Dorothy was diagnosed with breast cancer 5 years ago. The disease came on fast and aggressively. Arthur sold their house on Maple Street, sold the car they had used for their cross-country road trips, and withdrew his entire retirement fund, all to pay for Dorothy's treatment. She lived for another 8 months. 8 months during which Arthur slept on a chair beside her hospital bed, never leaving her side for a single day. After Dorothy passed, the medical bills just kept coming. Arthur refused to declare bankruptcy. He said, "An honest man pays his debts." So he took the only job available to a 70-year-old man with arthritic hands, washing dishes. Frank paused, wiping his eyes with his hand. "He's been living in that truck for 2 years now. His daughter in Seattle wants to bring him up there, but he refuses. He says, 'I don't want to be a burden to you.' And you know what? Every month, he still sends money to the hospital to pay down the debt. $400, $500, depending on how much overtime he gets. all while he skips breakfast to save money for other people. Jack said nothing. He just sat there, his hands wrapped around a teacup that had long gone cold, and listened. And in his mind, a plan began to take shape. For the next 2 days, Jack continued to come to the hotel, sit at his usual table, and observe. He saw Trevor and Courtney whispering, saw them exchange sinister smiles whenever Arthur performed an act of kindness, saw them secretly taking notes and making arrangements. He also saw Arthur arriving earlier than anyone else each morning, leaving later than anyone else each night, his hands swollen but never a word of complaint. He saw Arthur help a young single mother who was short on her room bill, saw him help a young man who had lost his wallet get a free night's stay, saw him pick up every fallen towel, wipe every spill, and smile at every single guest. And on Thursday afternoon at 3:22, Jack saw Trevor sit down at the reception desk computer, a piece of paper with a password in his hand, and begin typing. Jack pressed a button on his phone. The hidden camera system, micro cameras he had installed 3 days ago, recorded everything. Friday morning, 4 p.m. This was the hotel's golden hour, the main lobby packed with guests. Linda Hartwell, the branch manager, was at the reception desk checking the weekend reports. Trevor and Courtney approached, their faces masks of feigned concern. "Linda, we have something important to tell you." Trevor's voice was just loud enough for a few nearby guests to overhear. The fund system was compromised. There was a transaction, $847.63 was withdrawn using Arthur's code yesterday. Linda's face went pale. "Arthur? Him? That's impossible." Courtney chimed in, her voice full of fake worry. "I also saw the safe door open when Arthur was nearby. I don't want to suspect anyone, but..." Linda sighed. "Bring Arthur out here." Arthur emerged from the kitchen. He was still in his faded blue uniform, his apron damp, a dish towel still in his hand. The toes of his old sneakers were completely worn through. He stood before Linda, his gaze steady, his old eyes calm. "You needed me for something, Linda?" Linda couldn't look him in the eye, her voice faltering. "Arthur, the Employee Assistance Fund, some money was withdrawn using your code. Can you explain?" Trevor immediately spoke up, louder this time. "Arthur took $847.63 from the fund. I have the transaction record." A murmur went through the hotel lobby. A few guests turned to stare. One person pulled out their phone and started recording a video. Arthur remained still, his voice soft but clear. "I have never taken anything that wasn't mine. I apologize if there's been some kind of misunderstanding." Linda was about to say something when a voice echoed from the far end of the lobby, not loud but powerful enough to silence everyone. "Allow me to explain." Jack Sterling rose from table number 7. He took off his hat, removed his sunglasses, and stood up straight. Linda looked at him, the color draining from her face. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't know you were here." Jack didn't look at Linda. He stared directly at Trevor and Courtney. "Are you absolutely certain about your evidence?" Trevor tried to compose himself, his voice trembling slightly. "Yes, sir. I have all the proof." Jack pulled out his phone and pressed a button. The large screen hanging on the lobby wall lit up. Hidden camera footage. An image from 3:22 the previous afternoon. Trevor logging into the fund system, holding a slip of paper with the password. Next, an image of Courtney at Linda's computer, typing away, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes narrowed. And finally the audio, their conversation from Wednesday morning. "I checked. The Employee Assistance Fund has $4,217.83 left. It just needs a little adjustment." Trevor stood as if he'd been struck by lightning. His face was ashen, his lips trembled, and he couldn't form a single word. Courtney burst into tears, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. I'm so sorry. My mom is really sick," and Trevor said this was the only way to get the money. Linda covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face. The guests who had been filming were silent. The air in the lobby was as heavy as lead. Jack turned to Arthur. "Arthur, would you like me to call the police?" Arthur looked at Trevor and Courtney, 2 kids, so young, one trembling like an autumn leaf, the other sobbing silently. Arthur was quiet for a very long time. Then he spoke, his voice as gentle as if he were comforting a child. "They're just kids. They did something wrong. But they're not bad people. Maybe they just need another chance." Arthur looked directly at Trevor, a frozen moment that made the entire lobby hold its breath. Trevor couldn't hide the shame on his young face. He hung his head, his voice a mere whisper. My mom, she has cancer. I owe the hospital nearly $20,000. I didn't know what else to do. Silence. There was only the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of Courtney's stifled sobs. Jack looked at Trevor for a long time. Then he said something that no one in that room would ever forget. I'm not going to call the police, and you're not fired. You're going to stay here, you're going to work, and you are going to learn from Arthur. And one day, you will help someone just as you once needed help. That is the only form of repayment I will accept. Turning to Linda, Jack's voice grew firm. And you, as of tomorrow, every procedure for the Employee Assistance Fund will require 2 signatures. I will be sending someone down for monthly audits. Linda bowed her head, not daring to say a word. Jack walked over to Arthur. He placed a hand on the old man's shoulder, which was still damp from dishwater. Arthur, starting tomorrow, you're not washing dishes anymore. You're going to be the kitchen manager. Your salary will be adjusted. And that hospital debt, I've already had it paid in full. Arthur's eyes widened, his old lips moved, but no words came out. After a long moment, he finally whispered, How did you know? Jack smiled. It was the first real smile he'd had in days. My friend, I've been sitting at that table for 5 days. I saw everything. I saw you use your own money to help that old woman, to help that student, to help the young waitress. I saw you living in your truck, and I saw you still manage to smile. You don't know it, Arthur, but you're a richer man than I am. Arthur shook his head, tears beginning to fall. Not out of self-pity, but because for the first time in a very long time, someone had truly seen him. Fast forward 18 months later. The Sterling Plaza Austin was still there, but it was no longer the same. The Employee Support Fund had been renamed the Dorothy Brennan Fund after Arthur's wife, the woman who had taught him the meaning of unconditional love. Each month, the fund helped an average of 14 families in difficult circumstances, not just hotel employees, but also people from the surrounding community. The total amount the fund had disbursed in 18 months was $247,829.43. Trevor Dixon, now 25, was taking night classes in hotel management. His mother had recovered, thanks to timely treatment. Jack Sterling had covered the entire cost of her final chemotherapy sessions and never mentioned it again. Every Saturday morning, Trevor would make coffee for Arthur before he even had to ask. And every Sunday evening, he would visit his mother with a bouquet of fresh flowers. He never forgot what Jack had told him. Help someone the way you once needed help. And he did. Courtney Vance, 23, no longer wore heavy makeup or had that cynical smile. She was learning to be a pastry chef, and every week she brought 2 homemade cakes to the hotel. They were so delicious that guests started asking to buy them. She and Maria, the waitress who had written the warning note for Arthur, had become best friends. The 2 single mothers took turns watching each other's children, and Maria's daughter, Isabella, had a successful heart surgery thanks to support from the Dorothy Fund. Maria never told anyone about that note, but Arthur knew. One day, he called Maria into the back of the kitchen. From his pocket, he pulled out a crumpled old piece of paper, the scrawled handwriting still legible. Mr. Arthur, they're going to set you up the fund money. Tomorrow afternoon. Please don't ask my name. Arthur smiled. You know, sometimes a small piece of paper can save a person's life. Maria burst into tears. She wasn't crying for herself, nor was she crying out of fear. She was crying because for the first time, someone had seen her courage and didn't call it by some fancy name. They were just simply there for her. And Arthur was now 72 years old, but he looked healthier than he had 5 years ago. He lived in a small blue house at 1624 East 6th Street, a gift from Jack, who had lied and said, the company got a great deal on it, and since no one was using it, we're giving it to you. Arthur knew it was a lie, but he didn't expose it, because some lies born from kindness are as precious as the truth. Every morning, Arthur still arrived at the hotel at 6:30, 2 hours before his shift. He no longer had to wash dishes, but he still loved coming into the kitchen, seeing the clean plates stacked neatly, hearing the sound of running water, smelling the faint scent of dish soap. It was the smell of hard work, the smell of hands that knew labor. The picture frame on his desk no longer held just Dorothy. Now there was another, smaller frame beside it, containing the crumpled note with the scrawled handwriting. Beneath it, he had added in ink, Maria Santos, October 16th. Thank you for your courage. That afternoon, the air began to chill, and gray clouds stretched over the Colorado River. Arthur stood at the glass door, looking out at the parking lot. Trevor was lifting Maria's daughter, Isabella, into the car. The 7-year-old girl with the mended heart was squealing with laughter as Trevor tickled her. Courtney stood nearby, holding a box of chocolate chip cookies, a new recipe she'd created herself, the first she dared to sell to a customer. Arthur smiled. It wasn't the smile of a man who had endured suffering, nor was it the smile of a man who had found success. It was the smile of a man who finally could see that what he had been planting for the past 7 years was now blossoming. At table number 7, the one in the back corner with a panoramic view of the lobby, a man sat alone. Worn flannel shirt, old baseball cap, 3 days of stubble. He sipped his coffee, his eyes fixed on the 3 people laughing just outside the glass door. Jack Sterling didn't need anyone to know who he was. He just wanted to sit here, savoring the moment he had helped create. And he suddenly realized something that perhaps his entire life as a billionaire had never fully taught him. True wealth isn't found in the numbers in a bank account, but in what you can give without expecting anything in return. Arthur gave when he had nothing left. Jack gave when he had everything. And people like Trevor, Courtney, and Maria, they would continue to give, and that circle would never end. A clean white napkin lay on the table. Jack took out a pen and scribbled a few words. Then he stood up, left a tip on the table, and walked out the door, leaving the tiny white paper on the checkered tablecloth. A young waitress came to clear the table. She picked up the napkin, about to throw it in the trash, but then she paused. The words on it weren't meant for her, but her eyes read them anyway. Never forget, dignity is not a privilege. It is a fundamental right. The girl stood still for a moment, the napkin still in her hand. Outside the glass door, the sun began to set over the Colorado River, painting a corner of the sky in gold, and in the kitchen, old Arthur put the last of the dishes on the rack, smiling quietly to himself.